So the idea is to try and create some equipment that is going to be able to produce a slightly higher oxygen level than you would get in the normal environment. The normal environment gives you about 21% oxygen. With this equipment, you should be able to increase that by maybe 5, 10, 15%. And also the idea is to do that with the stuff that you have around the house, if it's absolutely necessary. So the things that I have got here are some pieces of stainless steel. This is from IKEA. It's just a piece. It doesn't have to be that shape at all, but it happens to be useful being that shape. I've got some tea strainers, which are also stainless steel. Stainless steel is important. Don't use copper, don't use zinc, don't use ordinary iron or steel, because it will rust, and that won't do you any good. But stainless steel is ideal. And some wire. I'm using copper wire that's normally used for earth, which is why it's yellow and green, and it's a nice strong copper wire. It means that you can actually support things with it. So those tea strainers, for example, are almost supportable by that wire. The wire must be covered in plastic, because otherwise it's not going to work. So you're looking for plastic covered wire, and something where you can take off the plastic at the end and connect it to the stainless steel just by wrapping it round. You're also looking for a largish container. This is also from IKEA, this particular glass one. Don't use metal, it's glass or plastic that we're going for. You could indeed use a container like a water container, like that, large container. And you also need a small container. Now this is the smaller container that I'm using. This is a old fizzy pop bottle, and I've cut the bottom off, and I've cut, if you look very closely, I've cut some V's in the bottom as well, so that any the water which this is going to go in can flow through the gap in the bottom. So that's where we are so far. You also need some pipe. You'll see that I have wrapped a hose pipe round the top there with some plastic tape, and then you need to connect that into something. I happen to have in the house some pipe work. Here's the pipe work. It just happens to be some pipe there, and that fits neatly into the hose at the top. And at the other end, just made a means for being able to breathe in the extra oxygen that comes out of the pipe at the end. So you'll need a few tools, a pair of scissors, and some cutters for the wire. You may also, if it's copper wire, you may need to use some sandpaper just to clean the copper off, to make sure it's as good as possible. Lastly, you need a computer laptop power supply. Now most people have got one of these around the place. This is an old one. You can see it's a bit worse for wear, but it'll do. And you'll see on there it says 19.5 volts, and there is a I think it's 4.7, I can't quite see from here, something like that, amps down there. 19.5 volts, 4.7 amps. Right at the top up here, you'll see the plug on the output from the power supply shows you which one is plus and which one is minus. The plus will go to what's called the anode, and the minus will go to the cathode. It must be a direct current coming out of here. It mustn't be an AC current. If you have an AC current, you're going to make a combination of oxygen and hydrogen at the same time in the same place, and that is extremely explosive. So it would not be a good idea to do that at all. It's got to be a DC voltage, plus and minus. And if there's any doubt about it, don't do it. Don't use it. Use something that's got plus and minus, and it's clearly plus and minus on it. Now 99% of them are probably plus and minus. You also need some sodium bicarbonate. This is bicarbonate of soda, sodium bicarbonate. It's found in most kitchens somewhere or other. The good thing about this is what's going to be called the electrolyte. You're going to put this in the water. Don't use salt, because it will create chlorine and that will kill someone. Don't use sulfuric acid, because there's going to be sulfuric acid vapour coming out, which is not going to be good for anyone. Don't use sodium hydroxide or caustic soda, because for the same reason it's far too strong. This is a weak electrolyte and it doesn't harm anyone at all. Well, you cook with it. So those are the things that you need. Now, how does this all fit together? Well, it's a bit ham-fisted, but we'll have a go at trying to do that now. You need one of the stainless steel elements to be around the outside. So I'm putting that into the water that's already got the sodium bicarbonate in it. So that's neatly, for me, works. And the other one has to be inside the bottle. And it has to be off the ground, off the base, so that there's a space, and it's inside the bottle. And that goes into, well, for me, it goes very neatly between the outside and the inside. Now, the whole point of this is that the stainless steel anode on the inside is not touching the cathode on the outside, otherwise you'll have it shorting and it won't work at all. You're also having a sufficient space at the bottom so that any gas that comes off of the tea strainers comes straight up and it doesn't go outside through the gaps at the bottom of the bottle. Equally, this cathode needs to be above the bottom so that the gas doesn't go up inside the bottle. So we now have that kind of combination that we now need to make this work. Now what I'm now going to do is just one last thing, and that is I'm going to put a bit of wire around the top of this bottle to hold it inside the jar, and that enables us to do a very neat little thing, and that is make sure that the gas, if it comes out and there is any pressure, it will push the water down inside the bottle, and it will disconnect the water from the tea strainers inside the big jar. So I'm just wiring that round there and just adding a little bit of wire there just to make sure it's nice and firm, so the whole thing is held nice and neatly inside. Now I've got two connections here. I've got the connection to the outside here, which is the cathode. That will make hydrogen. I ought to explain that the whole of this unit must be outside a window so that the hydrogen can go off into the atmosphere. The oxygen will come out of this pipe here inside, but the hydrogen has to go off into the atmosphere. If you try and run this inside for any length of time, there will be a collection of hydrogen inside your house, and that's likely to cause an explosion. So don't do it. It should run every time outside the window. If it doesn't, then just have a longer piece of hose pipe. Longer and longer hose pipe, doesn't matter how long your hose pipe is, and I'm sure you've got an extension lead for your power supply so that it can all work outside a window or whatever. Now it's connecting up time, so I'm going to connect the breathing apparatus into the hose, which is nice and easy because it happens to fit. You don't have to do it your own way. If you're short of pipe work, then you can take an old cable like that, and if you're careful, you can cut one end off the cable, the other end off the cable, and you can pull the insides out, and that gives you a pipe that you can then work with to do the same kind of thing. It requires a bit of imagination depending on what you've got in the house, because I know we can't go out and buy things at the moment. So the next thing is to connect it up the electricity. Oh, and put the water in, of course. The water should cover both the cathode, which is on the outside here, and the anode, which is on the inside. If you need to put a bit more water in, as you might need to as it evaporates or gets used up, then you can do that fairly easily. And you shouldn't need to put any extra bicarbonate of soda in. I used about half of that in here to make it work. So it's now connecting up time. I've got, you probably haven't got a socket for this, so I've made a piece of wire around the edge which doesn't come off because that's very neatly held on by the plug itself. I'm going to plug that into there because the inside is the positive. Very, very important that the positive goes to the anode, which is inside the bottle. Positive oxygen, that's what you want. Positive oxygen. The positive has got to go to the inside of the bottle where you're getting oxygen from. Positive oxygen, that's what you want. Positive oxygen, positive oxygen, positive oxygen. And the negative goes to the hydrogen, which is there. So I'm just there's the cathode, there's the negative, connecting those two together like that. Move it over a bit because it's pulling the thing out. Obviously don't put your electricity on until you're ready, and when you've got it all connected up, that's it connected up. You're going to draw, if you put depending on how much bicarbonate of soda, you're going to draw about 2.5 to 3 amps and 19.5 volts, which means that I've got around about 60 watts coming out of here, which is the same as an electric bulb, old-fashioned electric bulb, not a LED bulb. So there's quite a bit of power being used if you're using this approach. Just make sure again that nothing is touching from the two metals. They shouldn't be touching because you've got the bottle, the plastic bottle, between the tea strainers and the cathode down the outside. And make sure just once more that the positive from here, which you can see down there, the positive is going to the tea strainers, the inside of the bottle, and the negative is coming on the outside. Now this should normally therefore be put only operated outside so that the hydrogen can go off, and then you switch on. Don't see anything initially very much, but to begin with, if you get very close, you will see the hydrogen coming off at quite a pace, coming off the cathode around the outside. That's coming off at quite a pace. The oxygen won't come off at quite the same pace. Well, you get 2 amounts of hydrogen to 1 amount of oxygen, which is why it's H2O. So the hydrogen, twice the amount of hydrogen compared to the oxygen. But also the oxygen will be initially partially absorbed by the water. But the oxygen will start to flow internally, and that will happen as time goes on. You can just see at the bottom the oxygen coming off of the tea strainers now, and as it comes off of the tea strainers it stays inside the bottle and so will come out of the pipe here. Now the classic way of testing to see whether it's oxygen or not, it's beginning to bubble actually inside there now. The classic way of testing to see whether it's oxygen or not is by putting a smouldering splint inside the bottle. I don't suggest that you do this, because if you've got it all worked out like this, there shouldn't be any problem. We've got this kind of fog in the water already because of the amount of hydrogen that's being produced. And actually the power supply should probably be getting fairly warm, because there is a significant amount of current being drawn there to make that work. So there we are. That will, over time, it won't happen immediately because it depends on how long your pipe is, but over time it will bring a little bit more oxygen to whoever is struggling to breathe through this process. Thank you very much for listening.